Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
Well, welcome to the Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Foojan Zeine, a psychotherapist, an author, and the creator of the awareness integration theory. So thrilled to have you join me today for what I promise you to be a really insightful discussion. Today in this episode, I chat with Shawn Nowotnik. He's a licensed social worker, a psychotherapist, an artist, an author, and a filmmaker. He is a therapist living outside Chicago. So if you are there, go see him. After losing his son to suicide, he was compelled to reevaluate his own narrative and look at how loss, mental health, and addiction can affect every aspect of a person's life. He's developed a holistic treatment program and advocates for improved mental health and addiction disorder treatments, as well as researching, writing, and public speaking about addiction, community, and mental health, narrative, and social issues. We're going to talk about his new book, his latest book. Ready? Sitting down? All right. Fuck happiness. Yeah, you heard it right. Fuck happiness. The search for meaning in a world gone mad, chasing happiness. You can find him at ShawnLeonNowotnik.com. We spoke about what really happiness is. What's the distinction between happiness and motivation? About meaning. How do you define meaning? How do you find the meaning in your life? And what does all of that mean in different phases of life? How to become authentic with yourself and others in your relationship, to create and form those beautiful, meaningful relationships, which ultimately it does create a state of happiness for people. So I loved our conversation. It's two people who've gone through a lot, shared with each other, and two people who are also psychotherapists and listen and are with a lot of other people who are still searching for that. So I'm positive you'll gain a lot of amazing information for yourself, and hopefully it'll reach your heart and sit in your heart in that way. Now, be sure to subscribe to this podcast, my YouTube channel, and connect with me through my website, FoojanZeine.com, or any of my social media. Go to Foojan app and download the app. It's free for 7 days for you. You can go through 31 areas of your life, going through guided journaling, through the awareness integration theory. We found that people are stating that they have a between 60 to 70% improvement in those areas of life right after choosing. And then we have Mira within it, which is an AI chatbot, which answers all your questions from the awareness integration theory model. And it's like having your own therapist in your pocketbook at any time of the day or night that you want. So I'm excited to share that with you. I love to hear your comments, share your thoughts with me, because I want to know how everything is for you and how the app was. If you have ideas about the show, anything that you want to share with me. And without further ado, here's Shawn Nowotnik talking about happiness.
Listen up if you want to promote your personal growth and self-awareness. I found the Foojan app last month and I have been absolutely loving it. I personally have never learned guided meditation, but thanks to this app, I now have learned incredible tools for my own stress relief and emotional self-awareness. Not to mention, there are self-evaluation tools and professional coaching available to utilize however your journey to self-discovery takes you. Join Foojan today and redefine your life one step at a time.
Do you wish to wake up one day and hit the life reset button? Life Reset, the awareness integration path to create the life you want by Dr. Foojan Zeine, helps you navigate crucial life areas, heal the past traumas, and cultivate fulfilling relationships and careers. Life Reset is your guide to a profound journey to reshape your life. Grab your copy on Amazon or Audible now and embark on a path to a more joyous and fulfilled life.
Well, I am so excited to have you with us in our show. Everyone, Shawn Nowotnik.
Thank you so much for having me here. This is exciting.
Okay, I got really excited about your book and the name. It's provocative, right? So everybody, the name of the book is Fuck Happiness. So you're looking, I'm like, huh? I'm gonna have Shawn and he's gonna come in and say, no, you're not gonna have a happiness. And then I started reading your book and I'm like, that's not what he says. He's just saying, fuck the notion of happiness that you have. So tell me first, what happened that you chose this name for your book?
So that's a fun story and also a frustrating story. Mostly fun though. So 2 years ago, after I was done promoting my previous book, Habits of Successful People, and I was wondering, just like many people, what's next for me? So, I had this kind of existential moment where I was like, well, what am I going to do with my life? And then I started to think, am I happy? And I couldn't answer that immediately, which is really weird as a psychotherapist, right? I should be really in tune with my emotions. And I was questioning, just like most of my patients, am I happy? And then I thought, well, if I can't come up with the conclusion if I'm happy or not, I wonder if I'm making my patients any happier. So what I did is this really kind of funny thing. I went to Google, the almighty Google, to find out, well, I'm going to see what happiness is all about. So I go into Google and I type happiness. Well, there's billions of responses and I get this really amazing movie pops up and it's called Hector and the Search for Happiness. And I read what the byline of it is and it says it's about a psychotherapist who's questioning his happiness. And I thought, is this some kind of surreal thing going on here? Because I'm a psychotherapist Googling about happiness right now, and I find a movie about a psychotherapist who's struggling with happiness. And then the second line of the movie says, and he questions whether he's making his patients happy. And I said, okay, that's it. Sold. I'm going to download this movie. I don't care what it costs. And I won't share the details of the movie, but the movie was incredible. And I was elated and super happy. And I was like, I know what I need to do next. I need to study happiness. And I think I will write a book about happiness. So that night, I opened up my laptop, the title page of the book, I'm just going to use the working title, Happiness. And I started and jumped right in. Here's the problem. A year later, I'm done writing the book. I'm done researching happiness. I print it out to send it to my book editor. But first, I like to write in the margin, just, hey, do you think you understand this? Is there something I could improve or tighten up or whatever? I don't even get through the first chapter of the manuscript and my stomach is sick. I get the sinking feeling, this gut instinct that something's wrong. And I realized I went down the wrong path. Happiness isn't the answer. In fact, the more I thought about it, Hector in the search for happiness was really Hector was searching for meaning and meaningfulness. So I was so frustrated that on top of the manuscript, because I had basically felt like I wasted a year of my life, because I'm not going to put this book out because I totally don't believe in it. And I write the word fuck across the top of the manuscript. I throw it down on my desk. I go walk away. I come back and I look at it and I go, oh my gosh, that's it. This is my moment. This is my epiphany moment here. It's it's not about happiness. It's about meaningfulness. And I'm going to write about why it isn't about happiness and why we should really pursue meaning. And that's how I wound up with it. So it took me a year to come up with that title by writing the wrong book. So I was really frustrated with happiness at the time. So that's why the provocative title.
I love it. I love it, Shawn. As you were talking and as I was going through your book, I remembered the most important factor for life was to make as we're growing up, to make my mother happy, right? So my mother had to be happy for me to be happy. For some reason, it was about her liking me and everything. It would, if she was in a good mood, then I would be in a good mood. So defining that, and then defining where she told me that I had to be a surgeon and a physician, and I didn't like it. So it was then this concept of, again, about her and me. And And as I was reading your book about how the societal norm first builds our concept of happiness, and it's like, this is what we go forward with. So I remember actually around age, I think 16, 17, I decided that by 30s, if I have, if I have my career, if I have my business, if I have my house, if I was married and had the picket fence and all of those, then that's what the pursuit of happiness would look like, right? So if I had that, it would be great. So I did create that by 28. I decided I wasn't going to be a surgeon, but I got, I had my business, I had everything, and it sucked. Miserable. I felt depressed. I wanted to get out of my marriage. I wanted to let go of the business. It just, nothing was there. And that's when I went to therapy, and I really, like you said, it became the pursuit of what is it that gets me excited about life, that I would want to do it regardless. Like if somebody paid me or not, I just wanted to do it again. It was going back into school to become a psychotherapist. And, since then it's been that. So I really have experienced what you shared also in your book about how the society and what the society calls happiness is some things that we run after a lot of times, but that's not the case. So can you share a little bit about that and how you've shared it in your book?
Yeah, so we tend to look at other people for our baseline of what we should be doing in life. Like you were mentioning your mother, so we look at that and it's a reflection. We get a reflection back of what we think we should be and what we should want. So here's the problem with that is that's where depression comes from, right? Because what happens is a good example right now is like, let's just look at like something from social media and we see other people's lives, which is what a lot of people base their lives on, right? What their lives they think ought to be, right? Or ought to look like, or ought to feel like. And that leads to depression because we start to ask ourselves, why are they happy and why are we not? Why am I not happy? Why is my family not happy? Why is my business partner's not happy? And that's not really the truth. We're looking at this facade of what happiness is, right? It's not to say all pictures that we see or all images are not real, but many of them are fake or kind of phony, or there's just a moment, a couple seconds of their happiness before it is fleeting and the family starts fighting or that person is upset or they're and most of those people are probably questioning, what am I doing? So you touched on something really important, and that goes down to passion, right? A lot of people never ask themselves, who am I? What is my authentic self? From a young age, we're lined up, we are sent to school, we're told to line up a certain way, walk in a certain way, sit a certain way, raise our hands. Then we're told how we should speak and in what tone we should speak. And then it's to the point now where schools are teaching kids not how to think, but what to think. So it's no wonder why they walk out into society and they're like little robots and they don't know who they are. And then we have things like as you mentioned, influence from our parents, right? Parenting is a tough process. I don't, for anyone out there who's a parent, and I am one myself, it is not easy. It's a learning process. So even if we are, quote unquote, the perfect parent, which there's no such thing, we still can possibly harm our children, or their interpretation of what our expectations are can harm them. So then we have this other thing where now the child is questioning, am I the good child? Am I the bad child? Am I the smart one? Am I the not smart one? They don't even think about what they're passionate about. So you were talking about, well, I was supposed to be a surgeon. So you get on this path and you get in this very narrow lane and you're headed to somewhere, a destination that you never actually really said, I want to go there, right? And most people in society, this is what happens. We're so conditioned by expectations of everyone else, what we think society wants, what the barometers of success in society is, right? So society is like this kind of invisible puppeteer where we think that we can only be happy or have a meaningful life if we make a lot of money or we have the job title, right? Because those are the barometers that society kind of puts out there that's important, but it never asks us, are you having a meaningful life? Are you passionate? Do you get out of bed every morning and say, wow, this is an awesome life? Like, I can tell you right now, like, you know, My life's pretty good. I'm grateful, right? Like I get to go like you. I'm a psychotherapist, so I get to go into the office. I get to help people, hopefully save their lives if necessary. If not, improve their quality of life over time. I get to appear on these shows. I get to talk about books. I get to travel and talk about meaningfulness or whatever my subject matter is. This is a really good life. But I didn't get here from a child going, well, I want to be a psychotherapist and I want to be an author. No, not at all. Like I was conditioned just like everyone else. Like you should be this or you should be that. And I tried it and it wasn't for me. I wound up in a job where I was saying to myself, when are the 8 hours up? Because I wasn't getting any enjoyment out of it. It was just a job. And so that's, really important for listeners to really think about like, why do I do what I do? And that comes, right out of the book, like realizing that we've been kind of molded since childhood uh, to think a certain way. And I would suggest to them to ask themselves, who am I? And what do I really want? What really lights me up? What am I passionate about? And then worry about the money and worry about the other stuff that, if you can survive with doing what you're passionate about and what you love, because that's a really meaningful life.
Let's define together the conversation between what happiness is versus meaning, because I think that many times, beside what we just shared about the standards of the society that tells us to be there, and then therefore, if we're there, then we get the admiration or adoration of the society. So then, it becomes a feeding frenzy of, okay, I see myself in your eyes, and then therefore, if you admire me and if you like me, then okay, then I've received the happiness. So um, it's the essence of like an infant who looks at their parents' eyes and then starts to define themselves. Oh, if my, if the mirror who's looking at me likes me, then I'm significant and I'm worthy of living. And if not, so sometimes we have that as the happiness what we shared, and then there's this joy of a person who's just going to wants to use a little bit of a drug and just feel a little bit of elation, or they're doing this kind of a sport, or they do an activity which they get a little bit of a joy of a happiness of an emotion, at that moment, and then it fleets again, because right when you are no longer in that space or that chemicals kind of calm down, you're no longer there. And sometimes you kind of like fall into an abyss. You go from the extreme high to a very, very extreme low. And then this other concept of what you're sharing in your book, and we've just talked about, which is a different level of a state of happiness, not just, fleeting emotions that are there, or fleeting behaviors that on a short term is going to give us a little bit of a joy, which we call that. And if we're talking about happiness as a state, then you share about, we talked about the passion or the meaning that is there. So let's talk about meaning and how do people get there. I remember there was a 100-year study that was done in Harvard about well-being and happiness, and what they found is that after 100 years, which was having multi-generational from the same family, moving on with their grandchildren and their grandchildren, kind of writing and surveying, and what really made them happy had a lot to do with what you're sharing about meaning and relationships and relatedness, about the connection that people had with what they did, and with other people. And even sometimes the meaning is almost becomes about, how am I connecting with people, and how am I going beyond just who I am to make a difference for someone else. And you see a lot more of that state of happiness getting created, where we're not feeling the isolation, aloneness in here, and me, gimme, versus expansion of how to connect and create that connection. So can you share the distinction that you have between the happiness and meaning?
Okay. Yeah, I love doing this. And I always give a kind of a silly, funny, but easy way to think about this. Um, So think about happiness as ordering a pizza, if you eat pizza, which I imagine a lot of listeners do, right? Or at least they know what a pizza is. Imagine ordering a pizza. It shows up to your door in 30 minutes or less. It's hot. The cheese looks beautiful. It's not slid all over the box. You eat that pizza. It's really good. But here's what happens. 30 minutes later, you're wondering what's for dessert and what I'm going to watch on Netflix. It's very fleeting, right? It could be a few minutes, it could be a half hour, whatever it is. Very fleeting, very superficial. Now let's take the pizza example again and use it for meaningfulness. Now imagine that same exact experience, but surround yourself with family, friends, a loved one, a partner, beloved colleagues, just anyone that's interesting and you connect with. And then you have deep, meaningful conversation. Now that you're going to remember a day later, a week later, a month later, a year later, maybe even 10 years later, depending what you spoke about. But you're going to remember how you made them feel and how they made you feel. That's meaningfulness. It's long term, it's sustainable, it feeds our soul, it grows our roots if you think of us as like a tree or a living being that we are. And that sustains time. And we use that and we reference that over and over again of what's really important. So I'm very familiar. Well, I should say I'm not very familiar. I'm familiar with the Harvard study. I remember this. I'll age myself. I remember when they were at the 75-year point and they were talking about it. So I read it back then and I know about it now. So that goes also to human connection. But if I could step back right before you said that, when you're talking about that, you mentioned something, I think, or I just felt the representation of baseline when you're talking about how happiness is fleeting and meaningfulness. How do we not kind of ping pong up and down, right, with our happiness? So there's something called the hedonic treadmill. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, right? The psychological phenomenon where we adapt to positive or negative life events and eventually return to our baseline of happiness. So what does that mean? So yeah, so those little purchases you make to make yourself happy that maybe you don't even need, right away you're back to your baseline of happiness, right? The accolades you get, even if we win something really prestigious like the Oscar or the Grammy or some kind of major award in the industry, we go back to our baseline. So before you even make the first car payment on that sporty car that you thought made you so happy and you posted it on Facebook or some social media, you're already back to baseline. So what does that mean? So that means we really have to focus on meaningfulness because meaningfulness transcends time. So when you're talking about people either maybe using drugs or other stimuli to try to feel happy, if you have a solid baseline, that is filled with meaningful connections, especially. So what we're talking about is connections, right? I'm huge on connections, right? We're social beings, right? We come from tribes, and we're still in social tribes. So it's really important to nurture those. Even as a writer myself, I spend a lot of time alone writing, but I need that social connection. I need those roots with family and really close personal friends. And I would say if there's one thing outside of having, physical health going well for you is family and friends, and colleagues and people like that. So I highly recommend to people, if you want a really solid baseline, try to connect with your family, reconnect if you're estranged from your family, have those meaningful connections. You don't have to have 1,000 friends. Just have a good handful of friends that you could speak deeply to, that you have something to offer them, they have something to offer you. And it really keeps us at that baseline. So we're not chasing the dopamine rushes, right? Dopamine's great. It's, I love when someone says like, Shawn, I love you. It's like, ping, dopamine rush. I'm like, oh, that felt great. Awesome. But, knowing that they love me and that long term that they've been in my life, that gives me meaningfulness, right? And, so yeah, if we focus on that kind of stuff, that's what I think is really important. And I love the Harvard study too, because again, it emphasizes in a society that's all about me, 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 it emphasized the importance and showed that people took all different career paths. They made all different levels of income. Some had really rough tragedies. Some went to war, some didn't. Some were married, some were remarried, some were remarried again, some stayed married the whole time, right? But it was most was meaningful was the connections they had in life, the friendships, the family, their children, those kind of things. So I highly recommend um, people to, establish the friendship. And if you don't find friendship, and some people it's harder depending where you live, remote, somewhere in a remote area, seek out mentorship, seek out, like-minded people, and they're out there, and I think it's our best use of time is those human connections.
You talked about the baselines, and I can just share even from my own experience and what I do with my clients that the baselines are there based on whether it's genetics, biology, and then environment that we were. So my baseline was pretty much depressed when I was born, and in a sense, even abuse, neglect, a lot of those things. And my mother was also depressed. So I remember having completely a dysthymia for most of my life, right? Going to therapy and working a lot on myself. And it's the same thing you shared is like going into different types of excitements and different things. And then it would come back like it would. And I always share like I am always at the top of the well. And then it takes 2 seconds before I fell into the deep end of the well, because that was my baseline. I have been able to change the baseline for myself. And I know a lot of people have, obviously there's two therapists talking to each other. So everybody's like, of course. But there is a way that you can change your baseline when you go through this process of finding the meaning in your life and finding, you also share in your book about authenticity, about how you become authentic to yourself. And the baseline you could change from where you fall back, it can become in a place of content and feeling calm and enjoyable to yourself, where you find a base for yourself where you could be all of that, where and the base then has the sharing with others from an authentic self. I think that when we don't feel good about ourselves is when we're hiding something, or we think that the who we are is not good enough for the society or the relatedness that we have. And that's why we kind of hide and split ourselves. And the concept of coming back, the connection, the authenticity that you're talking about, not only with ourselves, but also with the people around us, is where we'll create that kind of connection and meaning. Can you share a little bit about the points of authenticity that you've shared in your work and your book?
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing that up because, yeah, I think, the book is talking about meaning, but a major component of that is authenticity, right? How can you have a meaningful life if you don't know authentically who you are? So, yeah, that's a major theme of the whole book. So, um, absolutely imperative to have good relationships, not for one with yourself, but for other people. How can you be in any kind of relationship when you're presenting yourself as someone else? And a lot of people do that, right? And you don't have healthy relationships. So the thing that I'm always looking for is how do I be authentic? And the reason why is because when I can be authentic, I can also be vulnerable. It's really hard to be vulnerable if I'm not who I say I am, right? And how do you have really deep connections? And I'm not talking vulnerable like, I just met this girl and she's awesome, so I gave her my credit card. I'm not talking about that kind of vulnerability. Don't do that. I'm talking about, you could say like, this is what I really feel, and this is what scares me in the world, and this is what makes me feel happiness or meaningfulness, and get rid of that. So one of the things I would say, there's a couple steps and that I always bring up to people about being authentic, is first we have to get rid of the fear of judgment. As I mentioned before, we come from tribes, right? And primitively back in the day, if we didn't fit in, we're not going to survive. They cast us out. That's it. We're going to freeze to death. We're going to starve. We won't get water or something. We won't have protection. We won't survive. So in modern days, I say the first thing to overcome the fear of judgment is again, recognizing that social media is curated moments of happiness. So kind of block that out of your mind that this is who I need to be and I need to live up to the standard. The second, and I think this is really important and they're not in order of priority, is have self-compassion. Oh my goodness. You know, not only are people struggling with who are they authentically, but oh my goodness, we're like so difficult on ourselves. We are our own worst enemies when it comes to self-critique. So have some self-compassion. I tell my clients all the time. Treat yourself like you would treat a dear friend or family member. We would never, ever, ever speak to our friends or family like we speak to ourselves in our minds. We are so critical of ourselves. So we kind of got to get out of those loops. We could probably do a whole show on that, right? Self-compassion. So that's really important. Um, I think the other thing is really important is for people to be authentic, is to get rid of this idea and challenge the idea of being perfect. So perfectionism is really harmful. I think it's great to strive for excellence, but perfection, I don't know that it exists in our world. We can give arbitrary numbers and say, oh, you got a perfect 10 out of something, or you got 100. But I'm talking about true perfectionism as a person. I think part of the benefit of being human is that we do make mistakes. We do have things that we consider failures momentarily, but we learn from them. We grow. That's where wisdom comes from, perseverance, resilience. So, challenge the idea of perfectionism. That goes back to the school, right? You get a gold star when you're perfect. You don't get a gold star when you're not perfect. But no one ever says to the kid, like, oh, Billy, that is a really great concept, though it's not the right answer. Wow, you're really thinking differently. Like, I like your approach to this. Like, keep having this kind of outside approach. I think you're onto something, right? No, no star for Billy. Billy, so he starts to focus on perfectionism. As we talked before, if you want to get over the fear of judgment and be authentic, you have to have strong relationships, which we've already kind of talked about. I think that's really essential. So many of us are taught that we're the captains of our own ship and we don't need anyone else, and that's not true. Ships need a crew, they need other people, they need advisors, they need lots of things, right? So that's important. A sense of self-worth. So earlier when you were talking about how you felt because the way your mom treated you, what her expectations were, so much of us and our belief of who we are and our value comes from external validation, right? Or critique, or just external. So I would suggest, which I'm sure you would agree with, is we need to learn to internalize our what's meaningful to us, what is a success, what is a failure to us, and not use external as a barometer for whether we're a good person, a bad person. Um, I think that's really important. And I would say the last thing about the fear of judgment and authenticity is celebrate your uniqueness. I think, and I'm not talking about, go out and have purple hair. I mean, purple hair is cool if you can get away with it at your job. That's awesome and it's fun. But I'm talking about what really makes you who you are. Not again the way you look or the way you dress, but who you are as a person. I think about the things that have really kind of impressed me is people like Walt Disney, right? Like he took his own path back in the day, mortgaged his house to produce a film, or Steve Jobs, he thought differently. And he even got fired from his own company and got hired back, right? So it's like he's a perfect example of thinking differently. And then I think of people like really that we should have like a holiday for, like Jonas Salk. Like the guy cured polio. Like I can't think of the last disease we actually cured except for polio. And, he thought differently. And he was very, very bold. I mean, trying a vaccine out on yourself is probably not the best thing to do, but he believed in himself. He believed in his work and he was very passionate and he was willing to take a risk and not put other people at risk. And I think so that idea of being unique is really important. So cast away the fear of judgment. It inhibits us so much from being the person we could be and we should be probably. And yeah, so that's really important, I would say, for authenticity.
Happiness, a humorous perspective on happiness and meaning. The Search for Meaning in a World Gone Mad, Chasing Happiness by Shawn Nowotnik. Shawn, you also in your book talk about how to define or redefine actually the concept of success and failure, because I think that we have created the concept of success again based on the societal norm, right? Like the society tells us what the parameters of success are. And if you don't meet it, then we call it failure. And I know in my own experience of life and with clients, it shows up as every path, the success and failure is right together, because it's like it has the same ups and downs, because I think part of the concept of success is our expectations. But then there we have somehow this unrealistic expectation that when I go up, I'm always going to stay up and it's never going to come down. So then I'm afraid of not reaching it and being not only failing a task, but then somehow assigning the concept that I am a failure, not that I just failed this task or this phase, let's say. And then there's also this concept of being afraid of succeeding, because there is this expectation that I'm not going to be able to hold it always at that realm, and it's going to come down. And if it comes down, then it means a failure. And in my experience, it's always, the ups and downs are always there. It doesn't matter where you get. There's always everything that goes up has got to come down, and whatever is coming up down has got to go up again. So it's what the meaning that we are assigning to the success and the failure that then it kind of makes us let go of the state of happiness that we can be in, and can see this as a process of what we call a success or a failure. And if we could redefine it, we could possibly even hold that kind of a state of meaningfulness in our life. Can you share your perspective on this, please?
Okay, so going back to the part of the ups and downs. So the way I explain it to my clients and is let's for instance just the experience of what they expect in therapy, right? I say this is not a light switch, this is a dial, this process. So I cannot flip a switch on and magically everything that you've experienced in life is gone and you walk out the door and that's it, right? It's going to be small incremental changes. There's going to be, I tell them, think about yourself as a mountain climber. So it's perfect that you mentioned the ups and downs. I've said, we're going to get to the top of some hills or some mountains, but we're going to have to come back down them to go to the next one, which then we're in a valley. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a perception, right? So when we think about, CBT, right? When we're talking about CBT, really, like Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. If we think that going down into the valley is a bad thing, well, then we're going to feel like it's bad and we're going to feel like, oh, things aren't working out. But it's not necessarily true. It's like, so kind of reevaluate that of why do I feel that way? And this is just part of the journey. So I think the other thing when you talk about happiness and meaningfulness is, the importance of the journey, of just being mindful of the journey, not so much looking for I always tell people, let's not look for the data points. Like, it's going to go here. This isn't the stock market, right? It's always got to go this way or we're not happy. Like, no, there's going to be a little bit of wave and we can accept that. And just know it's part of our journey. And that's what builds up resilience and stuff like that. I don't know if I answered your question exactly because I kind of got sidetracked there, but if there's something more specific, go ahead and hit me with it.
No, I think we got that. And I think part of what you were sharing, which is also in your book, is the concept of the complexities. I think that, for some reason, although life is complex and somehow the beauty of it is in this complex, that we somehow thought that we were promised an effortless life. And then the funny thing is that even if things are effortless, then we get bored and then we want excitement. But when the natural excitements of life is there, then we see it as possibly the failures, or why is this happening to me, and how life is so hard. So it's again a lot of different shift of meaning, looking at the ups and downs and the valleys, and through the complexity, and looking at, every age has its own phase that we enter to, and it doesn't matter how much you knew. The minute you enter the new phase of life, you're going to have a new complexity that you have to kind of gain acceptance of, or learn what to do with it. And I know, for example, I'm 63, so walking into the next phase of my life, it could produce a lot of different concepts. And when you're young, you're only looking at the future. When you're in the middle, you're still looking at the past and now the future. And as you're getting older, you're kind of like, let me look at the past because the future is coming to an end, and then all your anxiety comes up. So it really shows about how much each phase of life creates something new that you could get excited about it, or you could get afraid of it and take away that kind of state of contentment and happiness away from yourself. But if there's an excitement into looking at, ooh, let's look at what this one is going to be about. So it creates those complexities in a way of experiencing life kind of as is. And I think the acceptance of life as is, it creates more of that state of meaningfulness and happiness. That has been my experience. What's yours?
I agree with you. I think it's really so what you're talking about is embracing the contradictions of life, right? And the complexity of life. And that's one of the things where I knock about happiness, is this idea of like we should always be happy. Well, if we were, we wouldn't enjoy happiness anyways, right? It's kind of like life has ups and downs. We have sun, we have night, we have all different things, right? Warm and cold. That's why we understand the difference between them. And it would be really boring, I think, if everything was perfect all the time, because perfect then would not be enjoyable, and we'd be wondering what else there is. The other thing that you mentioned, which I think is really important, and it made me think about this, and when you talk about journey, is you mentioned the past and you mentioned the future. Well, you know this as well as I do, right? Depression lives in the past. I shoulda, coulda, would have. Anxiety lives in the future, right? Oh my gosh, I need to fear this. What if? What if? And but then you touch base on the really important thing is like I'm where I'm at. I'm at this stage in a certain stage in life where I realize that it's about the now. It's about, I need to focus on this. Yes, I can learn things from my past. I'm not saying we never look backwards. We should look at certain things, go, well, this worked out really well. I'm going to do that again. Or, wow, I missed like 9 red flags there. Like, or I deliberately chose not to look at 9 red flags, and I should never do that again. Right. But it's important to live in and be mindful. That's what we're really talking about, is being in the present. And I think that's really important in accepting those contradictions, right? That it's not going to be perfect, and that I used to think it was corny when people would say this to me, but now I have a totally different view. People would say, "You are where you should be," and if you're not where you should be, well, then what do you need to do, to kind of be where you think you should be? And it's like. At first, I was just like, I don't know, that sounds like a bad bumper sticker. But then I'm like, no, I don't know, there's something kind of deep about that. Like, in if I'm not where I should be, well, then I need to be doing something different, right? So then we're talking about change, or the way we think, or the way we act, and those kind of things. So, um,
It's
yeah,
true it's true about the bumper stickers that you're talking about, because I think that someone who's already gone to a phase, the next phases, they come from a wisdom of something, and then they tell us when we are not at that phase yet. So from that phase, it feels like, okay, this is just a cliche bumper sticker, and we don't get the wisdom of it. It's almost like they just give a statement, because I'm not there to really experience that. But when I get to the next phase of life, suddenly there's an experience of it So then you're like, oh, that's what that bumper sticker meant.
Yes, right. Yes. The other thing that when you were talking, it made me think about, and I know some of your listeners are going to be like, I don't know who this person is, but I was thinking about Erickson's stages when you were talking about, right? Like if we don't actually complete a certain stage in our life, we will tend to repeat it or we will not grow. So people don't have to know about Erickson. It's just the point of, we do have to continue to grow to move through stages of life. And that allows us also acceptance of where we're at. It doesn't mean, listen, if things aren't going good, it doesn't mean accept it and throw up your hands and don't work at it. It means accepting it, but being able to slow down and go, okay, this is what needs to change. I can identify whether this is a me thing or is it something external or is it both? Um, because a huge part is internal, the way we think about things and whether we believe we can actually change or change our lot in life, right? Um, I like to think about, so when you talk about meaningfulness, one of the people that I'm most impressed by, which I never got to meet, was Viktor Frankl. So if you think about Viktor Frankl and, for people who aren't familiar with him, he was in Auschwitz, right? Which is probably was considered the worst or the most horrific of all the concentration camps in World War II. They were all horrific, but I mean, so he was in the worst of the worst. And he was able to identify that if we have hope, we have a reason to live. So I also think part of meaningfulness is to also have a hopeful life. So he was able to create his manuscript, Man's Search for Meaning, in his mind based on the concepts of what he learned in the most horrific time. So my point is this. Meaningfulness is not always a smooth journey. That's why everyone gravitates toward just give me happiness, because meaningfulness can be a really painful journey. Like I would not wish anyone to have Viktor Frankl's experience, right? But from that, he's changed. I'm guessing thousands, if not millions, of lives through his books and his work and his seminars back when he was alive. And that's the great thing about meaningfulness. It has a legacy. It transcends time. Happiness. I buy you a lollipop, I buy you an ice cream, I pay you a compliment, you're beautiful. That's nice and all, but it's not going to transcend time. And I think when we do things, so the other part of meaningfulness that I probably should have tied in before, and I in the book mentions all these historic people, current and past, who are changing the world with meaningfulness is the impact that we can have on other people, right? So we're talking about what we need to do internally here, but if you really want to have a meaningful life, I think we have to add value to other people as well, to society, to our family, to our friends. It's as many people as we possibly can. I think that really is what helps transcend time. Um, and it creates a legacy and that gets perpetuated, right? And well, or at least we hope it does, and it improves the world.
I met his grandson, and his grandson made also a documentary movie about him. So people who are interested in Viktor Frankl logotherapy and his experience beside the book, which is amazing, they can also start looking for that documentary which he wrote. I'm enjoying this conversation so much that I was like, the time is passing. In 1 minute, is there anything we haven't shared with our audience that you really, really want them to know?
No, well, yes, yes and no. But in particular, I just always want people to really seriously look at themselves. Are you living an authentic life? It's not for me to decide, it's for you to decide. It's never too late to change that. Really get in tune with what you're passionate about. You know what you're passionate about, what lights you up. And it's never too late. Like make the most out of life. Find your path and whatever that is, do it. Like life is fleeting. Enjoy it. Make the most of it. Help others, help yourself, and know that you can change. And that's the important thing.
Absolutely. And where could people find you?
So the best place is you type in my name, which is Shawn Leon Nowotnik, which is ShawnLeonNowotnik.com. And that's my website. Will show my history of working in Hollywood all the way up to the books I release, the films I work on, and where you can find me doing therapy. You could type in my name as well and find me on Facebook. And that's where I link interesting shows like this and wonderful other information about my books and things I believe are worth learning about.
Beautiful. Everyone, go get this book. It's amazing. Fuck happiness. A humorous perspective on happiness and meaning. The search for meaning in a world gone mad, chasing happiness by Shawn Nowotnik. Shawn, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
No, thank you for having me. This was wonderful. So yeah, and I really appreciate your perspective as well, what you added, to this. And I want to thank you because I can tell you really read the book or you're really good at scanning stuff because you hit a bunch of points in there. I was like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, that's in the book. Okay. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
And for all of you who are out there, create an amazing life for yourself and everyone around you. And until next week, bye-bye.
Are you a psychotherapist looking to enhance your practice? The Awareness Integration Therapy developed by Dr. Foojan Zeine is a comprehensive guide to the principle and techniques of this powerful therapeutic approach. Join the growing community who have elevated their practice and expanded their skills by embracing Awareness Integration Therapy and witnessing its life-changing impact. Order your copy on Amazon now.